My name is Mason Walker, and this story begins with the kind of text message you never forget. 5 words that shattered everything I thought I knew. Don't come home. We're done. I was sitting alone in my bunk at a remote forward operating base in Jordan, a few days from finishing my last overseas deployment. The base was quiet, just the low hum of the air filtration system and the faint rustle of sand against the concrete walls. I'd spent 18 years serving in the US Army, rising through the ranks with grit and quiet loyalty. I wasn't some high-profile officer or elite sniper, just a logistics specialist, the kind of guy who kept things moving, kept people supplied, and never asked for more than a little respect and a hot meal. But respect didn't come easy in my life, especially not from the one person I thought I could count on. My wife, Kristen. We had met back in 2005, when I was still green and stationed in Fort Benning, Georgia. She was a nurse working at a nearby clinic, full of energy and warmth, or so I thought. We got married within a year, and over time we had 2 kids, Ellie and Travis. I loved them more than life itself. Through deployments, missed birthdays, and years apart, I always believed I was doing it for them, for our future. Kristen said she understood. She said she supported me. But something had changed. The calls had grown shorter. The video chats more infrequent. The kids seemed more distant every time we spoke. I chalked it up to stress, to long-distance fatigue. I told myself everything would return to normal once I got back home to Tacoma, Washington. And then came that text message. I stared at the screen for minutes, rereading the words, hoping, praying that I had misunderstood. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe she meant something else. But as I sat there in silence, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Kristen. It was a blocked number. A single PDF attachment. I opened it, hands trembling. It was from a divorce attorney, a formal notice of separation, already filed. My name at the top, cold and sterile. My stomach twisted into a knot. No explanation, no warning, just cold execution. I didn't eat that night, didn't sleep. I sat on my bunk, eyes fixed on the dusty concrete wall, trying to piece together the years, trying to figure out where it had all gone wrong. I had sacrificed holidays, anniversaries, and even the birth of my second child, all for what? So she could end our marriage over a damn text while I was serving my country. I felt hollow, betrayed. But underneath the grief, a fire began to smolder. A quiet, determined rage. I didn't know the full story yet, but I knew one thing. I was going to find out what happened. And when I did, there would be no coming back. Because Kristen didn't just break my heart. She declared war. The plane touched down in Seattle a week later, and I stepped off into the damp Pacific Northwest air, feeling like a stranger in my own life. My duffel bag was heavier than usual, not because of what it carried, but because of what I'd left behind, my dignity, my peace, my trust. I'd only told 2 people from my unit what happened. Both offered the same hollow words. That's rough, man, you'll bounce back. But bouncing back wasn't on my mind. I needed answers. I needed the truth. The first punch landed before I even got out of the airport. When I tried to rent a car using our joint bank card, it was declined. Confused, I checked the balance from my phone while standing in the corner of the terminal. The screen blinked, then loaded. $12.47. That account had over $30,000 in it when I last checked 3 weeks ago. Every paycheck, every combat bonus, every tax-free deployment deposit, gone, wiped clean. My breath caught in my throat. Kristen had drained everything. She didn't just leave me, she left me penniless, homeless. I felt like I was standing naked in the middle of the world, watched by strangers walking past with coffee cups and phone calls. No one noticed me unraveling. I called the bank. "Sorry, sir," the woman said calmly. "Your wife removed your name from the joint account last month. Legally, she had full access to the funds." I clenched my jaw. I was overseas. I didn't even know she filed anything. "I'm sorry," she said again, but the line was already dead in my ear. I ended up taking a bus, with my duffel tucked under my legs and my wallet nearly empty, to the one place I hoped I could still turn to, my sister's house in Spokane. Nicole had always been the quieter sibling, the one who stayed in state, raised her kids, and lived a life that looked boring on the surface, but was rich in things I now envied: stability, love, and trust. She opened her front door like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. "Mason," she said, pulling me into a hug. "You're staying here. I don't care what happened. You're my brother." For the first time in weeks, I exhaled. Over the next few days, I pieced together what Kristen had been doing while I was deployed. Turns out she'd been preparing for this move for months. She'd sold furniture, cashed out our kids' education fund, moved to a rental condo across town. Worst of all, she'd told the kids that I left them. Ellie barely spoke to me on the phone. Travis wouldn't even get on the line. And Kristen, she blocked my number. Full ghost mode. But she forgot one thing: I had friends, and I had discipline. If she thought she could vanish with my money, turn my children against me, and pretend like I never existed, she was dead wrong. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The following Monday, I walked into the Pierce County Courthouse wearing the only suit I had left, the same one I'd worn to my best friend's military funeral years ago. It still carried the faint scent of mothballs and grief, fitting considering what I was here for. I wasn't filing for divorce. Kristen had already done that behind my back. I was here to file an emergency motion to freeze assets and demand a temporary custody hearing. I wasn't going to let her erase me from my children's lives. The clerk at the front desk looked over the papers I'd filled out. "You're a week late," she said, tapping the file. She submitted her petition and financial disclosures already. "Can I see them?" I asked. "You can request a copy through records." 20 minutes later, I was sitting at a plastic desk under flickering fluorescent lights, flipping through a packet of legal documents with Kristen's neat handwriting all over it. I scanned line after line, my stomach twisting tighter. According to her declaration, I was an absentee father, emotionally unavailable and verbally aggressive. She claimed I had little interest in parenting and spent years away with no intention of being involved. Lies. Every single line. She even listed her new boyfriend, a man named Blake Dorsey, as a future co-parent. Co-parent. I nearly tore the pages in half. I'd never heard of the guy before, so I did what anyone in my situation would do. I started digging. It didn't take long. One search on Facebook, and I found him, perfectly filtered profile photos, hiking pics, and a smug grin that made my blood boil. A few more clicks, and I had the real story. Blake worked at a real estate office downtown. Kristen had been one of his clients. Turns out, she sold our house, the one we bought together, without ever notifying me. She forged my name on the sale authorization. A felony. My hands trembled as I took screenshots of everything. The Zillow listing, Blake's work profile, the public record of the property transfer. I compiled it all into a file and emailed it to the only lawyer I could afford with my Army legal benefit program. Her name was Alyssa Granger, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney with a passion for military family law. She called me within the hour. "Mr. Walker," she said after I explained everything, "what your wife did isn't just unethical, it's illegal. If we move quickly, we can freeze the divorce proceedings and file for fraud. Will it bring my kids back?" I asked quietly. She paused. "Maybe not immediately. But if we expose her in court, you'll get your voice back. And she won't be able to hide behind lies anymore." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the back porch of Nicole's house, watching the rain dance off the edge of the railing. For the first time in weeks, I felt something new rising in my chest. Resolve. Kristen thought she could ruin my life in silence, that I'd just disappear like all the other soldiers she forgot about. But she was wrong. This was war now, and I had nothing left to lose. 2 weeks later, I stood in a family courtroom on the 3rd floor of the Pierce County Courthouse. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, called the case number. My hands were steady, but my chest felt like it was holding back an avalanche. Kristen sat across from me at the petitioner's table in a navy blue blazer, her makeup flawless and her expression unreadable. Beside her sat Blake Dorsey in a tailored suit, wearing the smug confidence of a man who thought he'd already won. He didn't even glance at me. But what struck me most wasn't their arrogance. It was how casual they looked, like they were attending a real estate meeting, not a custody hearing. My lawyer, Alyssa, leaned in and whispered, "Remember, don't react. No matter what they say, keep your face calm. Let me do the cutting." The hearing began. Kristen's attorney launched into a carefully rehearsed narrative. I was painted as a distant father, more committed to the military than his own family. They said I'd chosen war zones over school plays and Skype calls over fatherhood. They even produced screenshots of texts, taken wildly out of context, where I'd said things like, "I can't deal with this now," during moments I was under fire overseas. "She deserves full custody," the attorney declared, "and the children deserve stability with a mother who has always been there for them." My knuckles whitened under the table. Then Alyssa stood up. "Your Honor, we'd like to introduce new evidence, documents indicating that the respondent's signature was forged on the sale of the family home. Furthermore, we've uncovered a romantic relationship between the petitioner and her real estate agent, the same individual now being introduced as the children's co-parent." Gasps echoed across the room. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Is this true, Mrs. Winston?" Kristen's face froze. Blake's smile faltered. Her attorney stumbled through an objection, but Alyssa had receipts, bank transactions, notarized copies of documents with mismatched signatures, emails Kristen never expected to be seen. I sat in silence, watching their narrative crumble in real time. This wasn't just about a betrayal anymore. This was about perjury, fraud and deception at the highest level. When the judge called a recess, Kristen bolted to the hallway. I followed, keeping my distance, but close enough to hear her hiss at Blake. "You said he wouldn't fight back. You said he was too broken." I stopped cold. Too broken? That's what they thought of me? That I'd come back from overseas just to crawl into a corner and die quietly? She turned and saw me. Our eyes locked, hers full of panic, mine full of fire. "You underestimated the wrong man," I said flatly. Then I walked past her like she was just another obstacle in a war zone. Because now I wasn't just fighting for justice. I was fighting for everything they thought they could steal without consequence. The days that followed the hearing felt like they belonged in a movie, one of those slow-burn revenge thrillers where truth starts peeling back the layers of a perfect lie. Only I wasn't the audience. I was the man with nothing left to lose, finally getting his footing. Kristen's polished world began to unravel at the seams. Court ordered a full investigation into the forged real estate transaction. She was forced to submit her communication logs, financial documents, even personal emails, and it didn't take long for Alyssa to find more red flags. Kristen had been siphoning money from our joint account for almost a year before the divorce. She'd been slowly transferring small amounts into a separate account under her sister's name. It was subtle, just under the radar, but over time it added up to nearly $50,000. Was she preparing to leave the whole time? I asked Alyssa as we reviewed the statements. She wasn't preparing, she said. She was executing. The judge wasn't amused. Kristen was slapped with a financial misconduct violation. The sale of the house was frozen pending fraud investigation, and Blake, the human smirk in slacks, was banned from having contact with my kids until a full psychological evaluation was completed. Apparently, there were previous allegations of manipulation in a prior relationship. None of it had come up in court because Kristen conveniently forgot to disclose it. Meanwhile, Kristen's narrative of me being an uninvolved father was quickly falling apart. We submitted evidence of every video call I made from the base. Birthdays, bedtime stories, even a 4th of July puppet show I performed through a shaky satellite link. I still remembered my daughter Emily laughing until she cried as I made sock puppets dance over a cardboard tank. That video made it into court. I watched the judge's jaw tighten as she viewed it on the courtroom screen. By the end of the second hearing, Kristen wasn't sitting upright anymore. Her shoulders were slouched, her gaze fixed on the floor. The confident smirk she walked in with had melted into something resembling shame, or maybe just fear of losing. But I didn't rejoice, because this wasn't just about beating her. It was about reclaiming what she'd tried to erase: my identity, my role as a father, and my right to be seen. And when the judge finally ruled, granting me joint custody, halting Kristen's asset claims, and ordering a criminal review of the forged signature, I didn't smile. I simply nodded. The war wasn't over, but I'd taken the first hill, and I'd done it without turning into the kind of man Kristen hoped I would become. Bitter, broken and vengeful. Instead, I stood taller than ever. Because this time, I wasn't just fighting for justice. I was fighting for healing. Kristen's polished image continued to crack under pressure, and for the first time since all of this began, the power balance shifted. No longer was I the absent husband in her carefully manufactured story. Now, I was the man returning with both evidence and resolve. The court's order for a forensic audit rattled her. Investigators were brought in to comb through every piece of documentation surrounding the house sale, the bank transfers, and her sudden decision to move the kids without notifying me. One by one, the truths she buried came to light. Her attorney grew more frantic with each new discovery. First, the backdated real estate paperwork. Then, the shady bank transfers under her sister's name. Finally, emails between her and Blake, discussing how to make sure Jordan never sees a dime, that were subpoenaed from an old email server she thought she'd deleted. When Alyssa handed me the folder containing the emails, she looked me straight in the eye. "You're not just going to win this case, Jordan. You're going to rewrite your future." I didn't know whether to cry or exhale. The kids were still caught in the crossfire, though. Every visit felt like stitching together torn pages of a book someone tried to burn. My daughter clung to me during weekend drop-offs, like she was scared I'd vanish again, and my son, once so full of life, now just stared blankly at his toys. One night, as I helped Emily with a school project, she whispered, "Mom says you don't really love us." That broke something in me. I didn't say a word. I just pulled her into my arms and held her. Then I told her the same thing. I told her the night I deployed, that no matter where I was, my love would never leave her side. Kristen had tried to use silence as a weapon, rewriting my identity by deleting my presence, but I wasn't going to let that continue. So, I got proactive. I recorded video messages for the kids, little ones, every week. Birthday messages, good luck notes before tests, even stories from my deployment days that I knew they'd one day want to hear. I uploaded them to a private server with access only for them. A digital footprint of my love, a record of truth. Then, I made a decision that caught Kristen and her legal team completely off guard. I filed a separate civil suit, not for money, but for custodial interference and reputational damage. The moment the summons landed in her hands, her attorney called Alyssa in a panic. "He wants to go nuclear," she snapped. "No," Alyssa replied calmly. "He wants peace, but if you keep denying him that, he's going to walk through fire to take it." Kristen didn't respond, but I knew she heard it. She finally knew this wasn't the same man she had betrayed while he was 7,000 miles away, trusting her with his life. This was someone who had come back stronger, smarter, and no longer willing to be erased. The civil suit brought something Kristen hadn't anticipated: publicity. Her carefully guarded life, curated down to the last filtered Instagram post, started unraveling in the court of public opinion. Once the news hit the local press, veteran returns from overseas to find wife sold house, emptied account, and filed for divorce via text. Sympathy shifted hard in my direction. People recognized my name. Parents at our kids' school began whispering, and even Blake's job, the one Kristen had boasted about endlessly, started asking questions. It turned out Blake's company didn't appreciate the scandal. HR departments don't take kindly to sudden internet attention, especially when words like fraud and custodial interference are being floated on legal documents. Within 2 weeks, Blake was put on leave, pending internal review. Kristen, once untouchable in her social circle, now had neighbors crossing the street to avoid saying hello. She tried to maintain the image, the car, the clothes, the forced smiles at school pickup, but the cracks were visible to anyone paying attention. She called Alyssa. "We'll drop the divorce terms," her lawyer stammered. "She just wants this to go away." But I wasn't done. The custody hearing was coming up, and this time, I brought the full weight of my case. The surveillance footage showing her emptying the house while I was on duty. The emails proving her intent to lock me out of our finances. The testimony of a child psychologist who had reviewed my daughter's drawings and said, under oath, "This child feels emotionally abandoned by one parent and is clinging to the other for safety." The judge didn't need more than that. That day in court, I stood before the bench in a plain suit, my medals left in a drawer, because this battle wasn't about service, it was about character. And Kristen, she sat pale, defeated, her hands trembling slightly as the judge read the decision. Joint custody, but I'd be the primary parent. She'd get weekends, supervised for the first 6 months. Blake would not be allowed any contact with the kids. The courtroom was silent as the gavel fell. Outside, Alyssa turned to me. "It's over, for now." But we both knew it wasn't just about court wins. This was about reclaiming a life, one I never thought I'd have to fight for so brutally. Later that evening, I picked the kids up from school. My son ran into my arms, tears streaming down his face. My daughter clung to my leg, refusing to let go. I didn't say anything, I just held them. Kristen watched from a distance. Alone. No cameras, no audience. The empire she tried to build on deception had finally collapsed, and I was no longer the man she thought she could erase. The months following the custody ruling brought a strange kind of peace. It wasn't victory that settled over me, not entirely. It was something more grounded, like rebuilding after a long storm. There was no parade, no applause, just the quiet work of putting my kids first and learning how to breathe again. I moved into a modest home in a nearby suburb, nothing flashy, just clean and safe. A backyard where my son could throw a baseball, a kitchen big enough to teach my daughter how to bake cookies. I set up a routine that worked: school drop-offs, work therapy appointments, homework, family dinners. We didn't talk much about Kristen, and when her court-ordered visits came, the kids always returned quieter than usual. I never poisoned their hearts against her. I didn't need to. Reality did the heavy lifting. One night, after the kids were asleep, I sat alone in the living room, staring at an old photo from deployment. Me and the guys, dust on our gear, smiles you could only fake when you were running on adrenaline and missing home. That photo reminded me I had made it through worse. This was just another mission. Alyssa called one evening. "You've got a letter from Kristen." My stomach turned. It wasn't handwritten. It wasn't even personal. It was a formal notice. Kristen had filed for bankruptcy. Her legal bills, Blake's job loss, and the mortgage she couldn't maintain had finally crushed what was left of her carefully curated life. There was also a brief line buried in the paperwork: she would no longer be contesting anything further in court. That was it. No apology, no ownership, just surrender. Blake, it turned out, had left her, packed up after his reputation tanked, and went back to his ex in Nevada. Kristen was alone, unemployed, and drowning in debt. I read the letter twice, then tossed it in the shredder, let her past rot on her side of the fence. I had work to do, real work. I started volunteering at a local veterans center, just a few hours a week, talking with guys who, like me, had been knocked down by life after duty. I didn't give advice, I just listened, and slowly I found myself talking too, about the betrayal, the pain, the unexpected strength in starting over. Each conversation healed me a little more. One afternoon, while I was helping organize a fundraiser, a man approached me. "You're Jason, right?" I turned. He was tall, maybe in his 50s, wearing a suit with construction dust still on his boots. "My company sponsors this center," he said. "They told me your story. I could use someone like you, someone who knows what it means to build from the ground up. You interested?" I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window at the street beyond, where sunlight hit the flag out front just right. I thought about the kids, about the nights I'd cried into a pillow just so they wouldn't hear, about all the strength I didn't know I had, until it was all I had left. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'm interested." I started my new job the following Monday. It wasn't glamorous, assistant project manager at a commercial construction firm, but it was honest. I liked the sound of steel beams clanking into place, the scent of wet cement in the morning, and the rhythm of plans being transformed into buildings. After months of being torn down, I was finally helping build something again. The team respected my background. They didn't treat me like just another vet. They saw how I took responsibility, how I planned every task like it was a tactical mission. Within 3 months I was promoted, and within 6 I was handling my own projects. Meanwhile, back in Kristen's world, everything kept unraveling. I didn't go looking for updates, but they had a way of finding me. A mutual friend forwarded a post from her social media, A blurry photo of her in a cramped apartment, the caption reading, "Restarting is hard, but I'm trying." The Kristen I once knew wouldn't have dared admit failure online. This was her last resort, fishing for sympathy from an audience that had already moved on. It wasn't just financial ruin, it was the collapse of her image. The polished suburban queen now reduced to public pleas and shared custody weekends that her kids barely looked forward to. Then came the moment I hadn't expected. One afternoon, after dropping the kids at school, I pulled into the coffee shop near my work. I was reaching for my wallet when someone tapped my shoulder. I turned. It was Kristen, thinner, tired, no makeup. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. "Jason," she said softly, "can we talk?" I didn't say yes. I just waited. I made mistakes. I know that. What I did, to you, to us, it was unforgivable. I stood there, coffee forgotten, heart steady. "I'm not asking for anything," she continued. "I just want to say I'm sorry. You didn't deserve it." For a second, silence stretched between us like an open canyon. I thought about the email she sent while I was overseas, the account she emptied, the way she treated me like I was disposable, and yet all I said was apology accepted, but not needed. I already moved on. She blinked. That's it, I said. I don't live in that chapter anymore. I turned, took my coffee, and walked out. I didn't look back, because real revenge isn't about screaming at the top of your lungs or watching someone fall. It's about standing tall when they expected you to crumble. It's about rising quietly, steadily, until you're so far beyond their reach, they can't even recognize the version of you they once betrayed. A year had passed. The seasons rolled by, but I didn't count them like I used to, not by pain or survival, but by progress. My apartment had become a home, not extravagant, but mine. A place with warmth, laughter and shelves, slowly filling with books and memories. I even bought a golden retriever, named him Cooper, who followed me like a shadow and greeted the kids with the kind of joy I hadn't seen since before the divorce. Speaking of the kids, they started to understand. It was slow at first. My daughter Ella stopped flinching when Kristen snapped at her. My son Nate asked if I could help with his science fair project. "Because you actually listen, Dad." It was small, but meaningful. I had gone from the weekend visitor to their emotional anchor. Kristen, on the other hand, drifted further. Her online pity parade dried up. So did her job prospects. Word had spread about the affair, the divorce, and her attempt to gut me financially. Even if she wasn't shouting it, the reputation followed. I learned she was working part-time at a boutique, still driving the same car I once paid for, and living paycheck to paycheck. I didn't celebrate her downfall, but I also didn't stop it. Letting someone fall is not the same as pushing them. One Saturday, as I stood with Ella and Nate in the backyard, watching Cooper chase leaves, I heard the doorbell. It wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door and saw my old boss, Fred. He looked different, not in the way Kristen had, from vanity to ruin, but humbled. "Jason," he said, "mind if I come in?" We sat outside on the patio. Fred stared at the kids playing, then cleared his throat. "I was wrong to let Kristen push you out. I should have stood up to her. I lost a lot more than a good employee that day." I waited. I didn't owe him comfort. "I've started something new," he said, pulling a card from his pocket. "A smaller firm, clean slate, no family drama, and I need someone like you." I looked at the card, then at the kids. "I appreciate it," I said, but I've already found where I belong." He nodded, understanding. "Well, if you ever change your mind." After he left, I sat on the porch and watched the sun dip behind the trees. The world had changed, but so had I. I was no longer a man begging for acknowledgement, for loyalty, or for proof that I mattered. I had built that proof myself, with sweat, scars, and grace. The best revenge isn't about watching others lose. It's about choosing your peace over their chaos. It's about becoming so complete, their betrayal becomes just another stone in your foundation. And as I stood there, arms around my kids, dog barking at falling leaves, heart full for the first time in years, I knew one thing for certain. I had won, not because I destroyed them, but because they could no longer destroy me.